This video is the second part for subtopic 5.3, classification. In this video, we will be going through the applications related to the recognition of features from some of the phyla from the plant kingdom, recognition of the features from some of the phyla from the animal kingdom, and recognition of features of vertebrates. So we'll start with the plant kingdom. So members of the plant kingdom are eukaryotic, have cellulose cell walls, and carry out photosynthesis. The kingdom is divided into several different phyla based on other similarities. The phyla that we will cover in this video are the Bryophyta, which include mosses, the Phyllosynophyta, which include ferns, the Coniferaophyta, which include pine trees, Angiospermophyta, which are all flowering plants and have seeds surrounded by a fruit. So we'll start with the Bryophyta. Bryophyta are usually small and grow in damp places because they do not have a vascular system to carry water. They reproduce by spores contained in capsules on small stalks held above the plant. So here we have the stalk with the capsule that would contain the seeds or the spores. They have rhizoids, which are thin filamentous outgrowths, but not considered roots. They have no cuticle and absorb water across their whole surface. The Phyllosynophyta features include that they have roots, stems, and leaves. They have vascular tissue for conducting water and nutrients around the plant. That vascular tissue is referred to as xylem and phloem. Some of them have fibrous roots, while others produce an underground stem called a rhizome. So here's the rhizome, which is basically a long stem through which you might have some rhizomes growing off of them. They reproduce by producing spores. In ferns, these are found in clusters called sori on the underside of the leaves. And the leaves are covered by a waxy cuticle. The main features of the Coniferaophyta are that they are usually large with a strong stem, so they'll be pretty tall trees. The main trunk continues to grow straight. Most have waxy needle-like leaves to reduce water loss. Think of those pine needles. And they have vascular tissue for conducting water and nutrients around the plant. So they have that vascular tissue of a xylem and a phloem. And they produce seeds which are found in cones on the branches. Seeds form in female cones, while pollen is released from male cones. So yes, there are male and female cones in pine trees. For the angiospermophytes, many are herbaceous, so they're non-woody, while others are trees or shrubs. They have vascular tissue for conducting water and nutrients around the plant. The leaves are elaborate structures with a waxy waterproof covering and pores called a stomata in the surface. Flowers are unique to the angiospermophytes, and the seeds from those flowers are going to be enclosed in an ovary, and after fertilization, the ovary develops into a fruit. For example, apple, orange, watermelon. Pollen transfer and seed dispersal often involves insects, birds, mammals, or wind and water. And they can be divided into two groups, the monocotyledons, the grasses, and the dicotyledons, which are broad-leafed plants. Some of the phyla of the animal kingdom that we'll go through include the Porifera, the Cnidaria, the Platyhelminths, the Annelida, Mollusca, Arthropoda, and Chordata. So in the animal kingdom, organisms within this particular kingdom are characterized by being able to move and getting their nutrients by eating plants, other animals, or both. Animals are divided into two groups, those that have a backbone, the vertebrates, and those that do not have a backbone, invertebrates. Note that the only group here with a backbone, the vertebrates, are the chordata. Everything else would be considered an invertebrate. So in the animal phyla that we will cover are the Porifera, which consists of sponges, the Cnidaria, which includes sea jellies and coral polyps, Platyhelminths, which consists of flatworms, the Annelida, which consists of segmented worms, the Mollusca, which contains snails, clams, and octopuses, the Arthropoda, which includes insects, spiders, and crustaceans, and the Chordata, which are animals that have a backbone. So we'll start with the Porifera. These features of this phyla include that they are aquatic, mostly marine animals. Sponges are formed into simple sac-like structures of cells in two layers, arranged around a central gastric cavity. Cells of the walls of the sponges specialize for feeding, structural support, or reproduction. Um, in this phyla, they lack a nervous system, and they feed on plankton, which are drawn in through pores in the walls, and are taken up by individual cells, and then that water passes it through that gastric cavity in the middle. The porifera can reproduce asexually by budding or sexually by forming free-swimming larvae. Main features of the Cnidaria include that they are aquatic animals with radially symmetrical body plans, meaning like their axis of symmetry runs multiple ways. So like whichever way you look at this particular organism, you can create symmetry around many different planes. The body cavity is a gut with a single opening for ingestion of food and egestion of waste matter. The body wall contains two layers of cell, an outer ectoderm, so here's the ectoderm, and an inner endoderm, which are separated by a layer of jelly, here it is, the mesoglia. The ectoderm will include stinging cells, which may be triggered by passing prey. The prey is paralyzed and held until pushed into the gut for digestion. Stinging cells are found especially on the tentacles. So here's a jellyfish, you have those tentacles with those stinging cells. Behavior of the body is coordinated by a nerve net in the mesoglia. Body forms are either a sessile hydroid form or a floating medusa form. So here's the hydroid form, and then here is the medusa form. Cnidaria can also include sea anemones and corals. Main features of the platyhelminth include that they are flat and unsegmented, platy meaning flat. Their body is built from three cell layers, a triploblastic, which is referred to as a triploblastic organization. There is no cavity in the middle layer. They have a mouth and a gut with numerous branches, but there is no anus. Feeding is by scavenging or predating on other small animals, and there is no circulatory system, but oxygen can easily diffuse to most cells. So since they are flat and they are small, oxygen can diffuse into the cells. Flame cells are present for excretion and regulation of water and ion concentrations in the body. Platyhelminths have both male and female reproductive organs. Some are free-living flatworms, but others are parasitic flukes or tapeworms. So here is the structure of the platyhelminth, and then here are the flame cells related to that regulation of various elements. The main features of the annelids are that they are worm-like animals with a soft body. They're built with a fixed number of similar segments, which are visible externally as rings. Each segment contains the same pattern of nerves, blood vessels, and excretory organs, so this is referred to as metameric segmentation. Internally, the segments are separated by septa that divide the body cavity into compartments. Each compartment is surrounded by the muscular body wall. The body cavity is fluid-filled, forming a hydrostatic skeleton. Gas exchange occurs along the whole body surface, which is kept moist. And the blood contains an oxygen-transporting pigment. Sense organs and feeding structures are found at the anterior end, and this is referred to as cephalization. Basically, like you have a head structure. Um, there is also a ventral nerve cord that runs the length of the body. Main features of the mollusca include that most are aquatic and found in freshwater or marine habitats, but a few are terrestrial. Mollusca have soft, flexible bodies that show little evidence of segmentation. The body is divided into a head, a flattened muscular foot, and a hump or visceral mass often covered by a shell. So here's the visceral mass covered by that shell. Um, and it secretes, which is secreted, sorry, by a layer of tissue called the mantle. So that shell gets secreted by this layer of tissue. They will have gills or lungs for gaseous exchange and have well-developed blood circulation. Most mollusks have a rasping tongue-like radula used for feeding. Mollusks include slugs, snails, limpets, mussels, and octopus, and this is the second largest phylum within the animal kingdom. Main features of the arthropoda include that they are divided into 5 distinct groups. There's crustaceans, arachnids, centipedes, millipedes, and insects. Arthropoda have segmented bodies covered by a hard external skeleton made of chitin, and their limbs are jointed. Typically, there is one pair of legs per segment. The exoskeleton is shed periodically as the animal grows. The blood circulation is open, and the blood is in a hemocoel cavity surrounding all the organs of the body. A tubular heart pumps blood into the hemocoel. Body function is coordinated by a ventral nerve cord with nerves running to each segment, with the highest concentration at the front of the body. Insects are the most numerous of the arthropods and have a body divided into head, thorax, and abdomen. 3 pairs of legs and 2 pairs of wings are attached to the thorax, a pair of compound eyes and a pair of antennae attached to the head, and they generally have a head with wide mouth parts, with mouth parts that are modified paired limbs, a trachea, and a system of tubes that pipe air to the tissues. And so these diagrams just show various examples of arthropoda. So as they grow, they basically will shed their exoskeleton for a larger exoskeleton as they grow into it. And then arthropods can also have varying life stages as well. So for example, the caterpillar, which enters into a pupa phase and then into that butterfly phase. Main features of the chordata includes the following. So chordata will include vertebrates and non-vertebrates. Vertebrates include mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles, and fish. Non-vertebrates include tunicates, which are sea squirts and salps, and cephalochordates, which are lancelets. Chordatas contain a dorsal nerve cord, which is a bundle of nerve fibers connecting the brain to the organs and muscles. A notochord, which is a rod of cartilage supporting the nerve cord. A postanal tail. They will have pharyngeal slits, which are openings connecting the inside of the pharynx, the throat, to the outside. These may be used as gills. And all chordates have these features at some stages in their life. So at some point in their development or some stage in their life cycle, they will have these features. So we'll move on to the subphylum of the chordates, which is the vertebrata. And vertebrates are those members of of that phylum Chordata which have a vertebral column in place of the supporting rod, that notochord. So that notochord gets replaced by vertebrates. So the first class that we'll look at are the aves, which are birds. Birds have a strong, light skeleton. Their limb bones are hollow with internal strutting for strength. Those hollow bones are what allow birds to fly. All birds have feathers, and the forelimbs are modified as wings. They have massive flight muscles, which are anchored to the pectoral girdle. Birds are endothermic with high and constant body temperature. Fertilization is internal, and eggs are laid with a food store, which is that yolk, and a hard calcareous shell. Jaws are in the form of beaks with no teeth. In the next class, the mammalia. So, with mammalia, the skin of mammals will have hair, and mammals will have four pentadactyl limbs. The body cavity is divided by a muscular diaphragm between the thorax and the abdomen, so that diaphragm that's used for respiration, for breathing, will divide that body cavity into two parts. Mammals are endothermic with a relatively high and constant body temperature. Fertilization is internal, and the young complete their early development in the uterus, and when born, they are fed on milk produced in mammary glands. In the next class, the amphibia, the main features of amphibians are that they have moist skin, and they use the skin for respiratory exchange. They are largely terrestrial animals that breed in water where fertilization is external. The larval stage, the tadpole, is aquatic, and then the adult stage is terrestrial. Tadpoles have gills to breathe underwater. The tadpoles will undergo metamorphosis into that terrestrial adult. In the reptilia, the main features include um, at least the terrestrial reptilia will have dry, impervious skin protected by overlapping scales. Um, they have lungs for gaseous exchange. Fertilization is internal, but the fertilized eggs are laid with a shell. Typically, reptiles have four pentadactyl limbs, but in snakes, the limbs are reduced or absent. In the osteocytes, these are fish with a skeleton made of bone. They have a mouth with a terminal position on the head, and they have gills covered by a body flap, the operculum. And that is the end of this video for part 2 of subtopic 5.3, classification.